In this video, I want to explain, a gentleman asked me, he said that he doesn't remember when I started talking about this whole MMA groupie type thing as it applies to Joe Rogan and Eddie Bravo. He said, but he didn't remember me from the beginning being that adamant about what I've said about the MMA groupies and the Joe Rogan, the guru of the groupies, and Eddie Bravo and whatever. And he would like to know how it got started. Okay, so I'm going to tell you how it got started. All right, when I really became angry at some of these MMA groupies and this raising up of Joe Rogan and Eddie Bravo. I'm also at the end of this video going to tell you why, in my opinion, and I've never said this before, but I'm going to say it here. Why Eddie? I don't give Eddie Bravo any respect for the rubber guard, because one thing that works in my favor is that by the time the UFC in 1993 was founded, long before Dana White, long before Joe Rogan, right? By the time it was founded, it was 1993 when it was founded. I had already stopped wrestling high school and junior college. Okay? In 1993, all right, I am 32 years old. I am 32 years old in 1993. Okay? I'm driving a sports car. I'm living in my garden apartment. Okay? I'm a licensed contractor. Okay? I'm doing well. I'm living large. Okay? So I was there. I heard about a lot of things. I knew before things started happening where they were happening. Because I was black and I was a wrestler, I knew who black wrestlers were. So Daryl Golar was a black wrestler who was very good in Greco-Roman. And when I was told, you know, I didn't know him personally, but you're told, because when black guys did something in wrestling, and there weren't that many, it came down the pipe. When I was told, long before the UFC, that Daryl Golar had went to Brazil, I've said this before in another video. You know, me and the guys were laughing, oh, Brazil. The first thing we're thinking about is Brazilian women, right? Brazilian women, Dominican women, back then that was our ideal kind of women for us, for me, and my group of friends, right? So when we look at that, right, we say, oh man, we start laughing. But we found out he's going to teach wrestling to a group of Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, and we think it's Japanese Jiu-jitsu until they tell us, no, it's not that. It's almost like judo, right? So we say, okay, well, he's going to Brazil. What's he going over to Brazil for? Well, he's teaching some guys wrestling who fight, you know, with no hands. You know, they fight with no pads. It's like bare knuckle. Well, we're like, what? So then they give us some names. This is long before the UFC. They give us, this was actually before the UFC, not long before the UFC, but somewhat before the UFC. So they give us some names. Oh, well, who are these names? Well, there's some Nogueira brothers. They're brothers. I think they're twins, this guy says to me. It's a Sperry guy, Mario Sperry. I remember Mario Sperry. Then they said this guy, Busta. They couldn't even pronounce Bustamante. All right, but it was Murillo Bustamante. And they said it was this young kid that's supposed to be good, right? Victor Belfort, right? Later Victor Belfort, right? Who was a young kid at the time, right? So we're like, oh, okay, all right, he should have fun in Brazil. Okay, that's how far back I go. So I go back so far that I know where things come from. So when someone is ripping off someone and not giving them credit for it, and not even mentioning their name, but saying they were good, but not telling them where things come from, then I have an issue with that. So let me just tell you why I started getting irritated with the groupie from MMA, not the MMA fan. Because I'm a fan of MMA. But the groupie MMA people, right, who look at Joe Rogan as some icon. Let me tell you why I got ticked off. And you want to hear this. Okay. Because of my viewing habits, it was recommended that I look at a particular video maybe a year ago. Right? Maybe a year ago. Longer than that. Maybe 2 years ago. However long. But it wasn't that long ago. Right? And it basically was on Rory MacDonald. And Rory MacDonald was, looking at the clock there, got to go out and teach a class. Rory MacDonald had left the UFC. So now he had left the UFC, so I look at some of these comments. And something just said, look at comments. Usually I don't look at the comments, so I just, you know, look at the video. Oh, wow, you leaving the UFC, all right. Right? So I go down, and I see this icon. It was a unique icon, but this one guy, he says, good riddance. Good riddance, Rory MacDonald. Good riddance. Right? Yeah, well, he lost, and he needs to go. I'm so tired of seeing him lose, and he's a crybaby, and this and that, right? So this is what this guy says about Rory MacDonald. Rory MacDonald One of the bravest fighters to ever enter the cage. If you look in the dictionary and it says warrior, Rory MacDonald is in the first row. Rory MacDonald, the man with mask blood, him and Robbie Lawler, and Rory MacDonald is like ready to go. And he looks like he's got hit in the face with a pizza, blood all over, right? And he's ready to go. He's like this. At a time most people would stop, he wants to get in there and mix it up more. Rory MacDonald, this guy, said good riddance from the UFC. I'm so tired of hearing you complain. Oh, yeah, I'm tired of you losing. You're boring. You're this, you're that. So I just typed. I said, well, you know, this is one of the greatest fighters, one of the most gallant fighters. If not the greatest fighters, one of the most gallant fighters who, for some reason, Dana White kept throwing to the wolves, right? I don't know what he did to Dana White, but Dana White threw him to the wolves. Never gave him an easy fight as far as I'm concerned, right? And Rory MacDonald was so good that if it was an easy fight, he would have won them easy. Rory MacDonald had all the skills. So if he's in a hard fight, it's because Dana White gave him deliberately a hard fight. So now I type into this guy. I said, well, Rory MacDonald was this and that. What do you do? What have you done? Right? So I just let it go at that. Then some time ago, it was another video. And this other video came to me and it was like, you know, based on your viewing habits, whatever. So I don't really know what it was. Because Joe Rogan doesn't say anything that I really care about, particularly, right? Really, unless he says something that's absolutely ridiculous, and I feel like I gotta pull him over to the table, right? But it says something, and I look, and Joe Rogan is talking, right? And then he throws a kick at the air. Now he throws a kick at the air, and I said, oh man, what is this? But what are people saying? Do people really think that this is something, throwing a kick at the air? Do people really think this is a big deal? So I just go and I look. Now, I don't know that the guy who commented on Rory MacDonald is commenting on Joe Rogan. I look at that icon and I see Joe Rogan is a beast. He's a beast. I wouldn't want to get hit with that kick. So I look and I say, whoa, wait a minute. That can't be the same guy. So I look at that icon and then I type in, Rory MacDonald's leaving the UFC, right? So there's a lot of videos on it. About the third video from me looking at, I see that icon again. And sure enough, I had minimized the window in the one with Joe Rogan, the video with Joe Rogan, and then I maximized the window. And I compared, and I had a split window. And sure enough, it was the same icon. The same exact guy who bashed Rory MacDonald, who said good riddance from the UFC, who said he was nothing, who said he lost too much, who said he cried too much, right? That the UFC would be better without him, looked at Joe Rogan kicking at the air and said, whoa, look at that kick. He's a beast. I wouldn't want to be kicked with that kick. Well, that pissed me off. Yes, it did. It pissed me off. Because this same guy said Joe Rogan is the best kicker in the UFC. He ain't in the UFC. So when that man criticized, or when that person criticized Rory MacDonald like he did, and then went and elevated Joe Rogan like he was the MMA god, I said, yes, it's on. It's on. There is a problem with the UFC fan who does not fight. And I don't mean fight in the Bellator, fight in the UFC. I mean even in his garage. There is a problem. The problem with the UFC or the MMA, not UFC, the MMA groupie is the same problem that the boxing groupie has. They do not know enough to make really good decisions or make really good comments. All right? They do not know enough, and it becomes nauseating to hear them bash one person and then love another person. And that's what did it. If it had been someone else, I wouldn't have said much about it. But Rory MacDonald, you have a problem with. But Joe Rogan is a beast. Well, yes, that's when it started. That's when it started. Okay? That's when it started. And that's when I started talking about this man who trained in Taekwondo with no punches to the head. All right? That's it. Never really came down to New York, where you got poor whites, where you have Hispanics and you have blacks. And he was no more than 200 miles from New York. All right? No one I ever saw him in any of big tournaments in New York, and that's where the money is. And you know why he never traveled to New York? Because in New York, we punch to the head. Okay? We punch to the head. In the ghetto, in the city, you run into some people. Okay? You run into some people. Okay? And then the grappling. The grappling on his back, and I mean, look, the main thing you're doing is on your back. That's your claim to fame, and that will bring me to the next thing. The next problem I have with Eddie Bravo. But when it comes down to Joe Rogan, that's it. The one man criticized. I knew I had to come out and say something, because when one man criticized Rory MacDonald, and then that same man, that same person, right, praised Joe Rogan, I had to say something about this MMA groupie stuff. Okay? Now, when it comes down to Eddie Bravo, I do not give Eddie Bravo. I was asked if I give him any credit for the rubber guard. No, and I will tell you why. I do not give Eddie Bravo any credit for the rubber guard. And you're going to hear this from me. I don't know if anyone else has said this, but I know I have said it, and I'm going to tell you. Okay? As far as I'm concerned, when it comes down to the rubber guard, Eddie Bravo is a thief. When it comes down to the rubber guard, Eddie Bravo is a thief. All right? I have been around martial arts so long, okay, long before the UFC, certainly long before Dana White, when Dana White, like Floyd Mayweather said, and this one time I agree with Floyd Mayweather, Dana White used to carry people's bags. He was a peon. He cut his hair, got a bald head, then he wants to play tough guy. All right? Same thing with Joe Rogan. Okay? Long before Dana White, long before Joe Rogan. All right? I've been involved in the martial arts. I saw the UFC when it was coming about. Okay? When it was coming about. When it was a question whether Rickson Gracie was actually going to represent the Gracie family and not Royce. That's how far back I go. Okay? That's how far back I go. All right? When Art Davies, right? When Art Davies was negotiating with Rory and Gracie. That's how far back I go. To create the UFC. All right? So, now, when we look at that, let's understand this. Let's understand this. There is one individual who created the rubber guard. He created the rubber guard and never called it that. All right? You can see him fighting in it. He created it. Now, when it looks like when Eddie Bravo does it, he might have put some certain techniques to it. All right? But essentially, the rubber guard was not founded by Eddie Bravo. He ripped it off. He stole it. The person that he stole it from, he does say is a good fighter. But he doesn't give him credit for inventing what is called the rubber guard. This man just did not call it the rubber guard. Okay? The man who did the rubber guard, the man who Eddie Bravo stole the rubber guard from, BJ PENN. BJ PENN is the one who started doing the rubber guard. He just didn't name it that. Okay? Eddie Bravo ripped him off and never gave him the credit he deserves for it. So no, he don't deserve credit for the rubber guard. He stole it from BJ PENN. I'm with Fight Camp, Save Carmen. Train hard, train smart. See you next video.